Allow me to greet you and wish you a very fruitful day, fruitful night, and God's blessings in all that you do as an individual, as a company, as everything. My name is Gorethi Namuga. I was a member of parliament from Angola County, and I belong to the National Platform. Allow me to greet all my colleagues in the NUP and remind you that we still pursue for the freedoms of all our political prisoners. As you are aware, our colleagues, comrades, the leader of opposition and the entire team, inclusive of our acting president, the Honorable Nambeshe, were in Butambala to seek for bail for the Honorable Mwanga Chibumi. I know bail was not granted. So many reasons were given, inclusive of chasing the media out of the courtroom. So those are the things that we continue to talk about as citizens, that is a violation of human rights. Those courts are there for and in the interest of the Republic of Uganda. So we continue to appeal to the judiciary that, make sure that you operate within the coffers of the law. It is in the interest of every one of us. So to our political prisoners, much as we take this direction to remind the country of our obligations and the government, we are not sitting back in as far as demanding for the rights of the political prisoners and all other prisoners in the country. Human rights, freedoms on a human basis are non-negotiable according to our constitution. Allow me to thank every single Ugandan that wakes up every day to go and work. You are the reason as to why government can give services, those that they can give. You are the reason as to why, as a country, we can access those little services. But also we value you because without payment of tax, this country cannot survive. Banande tubebaza mwena abasasula omusolo newankubadde omulamu waffe olwaleero kutunuulira misolo na butabo tukosa obulamu bwo. Tetwerabira kujukiza gavumenti nti tubanja bannaffe abali mu busibe bwe tugamba nti bwabuwaze obusibe bubeerayo naye ate buno obw'ebyobufuzi butuuka ne bukoma. Okulinyirira eddembe ly'obuntu, okulinyirira eddembe ly'Abannayuganda tukivumirira kubanga gavumenti yali baddewo okukuuma abantu n'ebyabwe n'okulaba nti Bannayuganda baba abakozi okubeezawo gavumenti yaabwe. Ekyabadde Butambala ewa Honorable Mwanga Kibumbi mwakirabye baamunye bail ne bongera okugoba bannamawulire mu kkooti. So bino byonna biraga nti waliwo ekitatambula bulungi. So enyongera okusabira essira eddamuzi okulaba nga likozesa ebifeebi oba ofiisi eyo ku lw'obulungi n'okuyamba Bannayuganda. So mwenambala musaako gye mukolera twasalawo nti omulamu egino tujja gyogeranga mu Luganda ne mu Luzungu buli omu asobole okuba part of the discussion. So here we are. Our simple topic today is taxes and their impact on livelihood. Remember, we started with good governance. What is a government? We all know now that we have the three arms of government. We have the executive, we have the judiciary, we have the legislature. Now that we have government, how does government earn a living? Government how does government get money? And where does government get money? That brings us to the topic of taxes. We want to understand our national budget, where the money comes from, where the leakages are, challenges faced by taxpayers, and the proposals on how to do better. The reason as why we come up with such discussions is because we are the country. The leaders only have a duty of being custodians of our property, inclusive of our money. But we have a duty as citizens to ensure that this country is run. That is why we pay taxes. So it is mandatory for any Ugandan to pay tax. But also it is mandatory for government to collect taxes that are legal. Now, what comes to your mind? What do you reflect? Questions for reflection. When somebody speaks about a tax, for you, what comes to your mind? Why does government collect taxes? How much does government collect? Where does government draw its mandate to collect taxes? Who are the key stakeholders in tax collection? What are the categories of taxes? Why should we pay tax as Ugandans? Why do we look at taxes as a punishment? Why does government lose if we don't pay taxes? Sometime back on social media, I saw our colleagues moving out. It was the national economic shutdown. I saw it moving around the social media. I don't know who is endorsing that. But their concept was, if government does not give services, if we feel there are a lot of human rights violations, why don't you also, intentionally refuse to pay taxes? That is not the direction that we are taking today. But that comes to my mind when we say, is paying taxes a punishment? Why should people, why should we not pay taxes? Why should you smuggle goods? So everyone, I want to ask you, wherever you are, in your business, do you pay tax? How much do you pay? And if you don't pay, why don't you pay? So those are the things we have to look at today in the interest of preparing ourselves for a new Uganda. Most of you, complain about the shortfalls of government as of recent. Very true, we all know. But still, it's our duty as citizens to organize ourselves for any leadership that will come in the future. Or now, because when you have a civilized and a sensitized citizenry, that is the only way a government can, is government business and service delivery to the citizens. What is a tax? Omusolo chechi. Eri yambadde gyensose bibadde ebibuuzo okubuuza ti omuntu bw'ayogera ekigambo omusolo, what comes to your mind? When somebody talks about the tax, government emisolo egijjawa? Government emisolo ekuŋŋaanya emeka? Government omusolo erina kugujjawa? Baani bitongole ki ebirina otuyambako mu kusoloza emisolo n'okugitegeera? Misolo ki gye tusasula? Era lwaki tusasula emisolo? Okusasula emisolo kibonerezo ki kye tufiirwa nga gavumenti tetugiwadde emisolo? So there's ensonga. Era when we twebuuza, what was for ourselves, what is a tax? A tax is a mandatory payment or a fee collected by a government from people and business. So the thing is very simple. Look at the word mandatory, government, people, business. Already we have close to 4 stakeholders. Mandatory, chateka, okusasula omusolo. Number 2, government yani. Bebanna fawa bali mu buyinza. Oba baabwewa, oba twabubawa, that is the government. The technical and the political wing of government, inclusive of the 3 arms. Actually, government are the 3 arms of government: the executive, judiciary, and the legislature. Now, people, who are the people? It's us. Chikutegeza, this means without people, you can't have a government. Abantu batebaliwo, government teriwo. Naye ate naffe, business nga teziriwo, oba emirimu, abantu tusobola kusurvivinga, government tesobola kusurvivinga. What does this mean? The government, the people, and business are key stakeholders in running the country. It doesn't matter, because even when government employs you, or if you are in the formal sector, that is business, though it might be for profit or non-profit. So the 3 concepts here as we do proceed: government, people, and business. Kikyentegeeza nti ekigambo kye bayita musolo kirina ebintu ebyenjizo 3. Omusolo oteekeddwa ogusasula era gwabuwaze. Gavumenti yegukuŋŋaanya mu bantu nga abantu bagujja mu mirimu gye bakola. Bizinensi eziri fomo bakozesa bukozesa oba weekozesa. So that is tax for you. What is the tax used for? Kale kyabuwaza okusasula omusolo. Naye omusolo gukola ki? Remember, we are going to look at 4 areas as we do proceed. For today, tugenda kutunuulira how does the government earn money? Government eyingiza etya? Olunalyako tutunuulire esaasaanya eteeka, how does it allocate money? Bwe tumala ogiwa ssente zaffe ziteeka mu biki? Kino tukikola mu kulaba nga tuzimba Uganda eyaffe gye tutegeera. N'abantu bamanye nti government okuwa services tekuyamba buyambi. Sometime back, most of you have been sending me messages, Honorable Namuga, Simani, your file is ready at CMI Chiguli, you ran out of the country. I had all those. I told you, I think I recorded the video and said, I won't leave the country. I'm here. I'm a Ugandan. And it is an obligation to stay within my country, except when I have anything else to do outside the country. So, government. It is also wrong. Because what you are actually productive, government is failure. When people are in prisons, the government loses. You have a working population of close in between 15 to 20 million. The labor that we have. Government loses money. So mulekerawo okuteekawo embeera y'obunkenge ku bantu okusiba abantu mu mbeera etategerekeka. So ffenna tumanye nti we are all stakeholders in our country. Abatukulembera muli ba mugaso nnyo, but you must also appreciate nti tuli ba mugaso. N'ekirala mulina okumanya nti ssemateeka atukkiriza ffenna okuba mu bibiina ebyenjawulo, okuba mu ddiini ez'enjawulo, n'okukola emirimu egy'enjawulo. Otherwise ffenna twalibadde bakozi ba gavumenti, ffenna twalibadde mu kibiina ekiri mu buyinza ekyenaalemu, oba mwenna mwalibadde bannu. Naye ssemateeka akuwa omukisa buli omu okuba mu kibiina ky'oyagala, okukola bizinesi gy'oyagala, as long as it is legal, ng'eri mu mateeka. So nsaba tuggyewo embeera ey'obunkenke. Obuvunaanyizibwa bwa gavumenti is to ensure that there is unity and stability. So nze nga namugga wano sivaawo kyonna ekintuukako hiya wano era wenyongera okutegeeza abateeka ku bunkenke, ekyo naffe tugenda kikkiriza tujja kwerwanako using the legal means. So that is why we take the time as citizens of making sure nti abantu baffe bategeere balina okukola, nti abakulembeze muleme okuba na mugugu bate olusoma muleme okufuuka kizibu eri bannansi kubanga tebategeera kiki balina kukola. So bagambi, what is a tax used for? Government uses tax money to pay for public goods and services. These shared services include infrastructure, public safety, education, health, and many others. These are called public goods. When you see a road, it's the duty of government to work on roads so that we can, do business. To the schools. So, and so Marathi Sasuro Solo. Government is a to where is a while with Takatako. Government, you never tend agenda before you go out to borrow externally. And very early so say over what the government should do is to make sure that it has a productive population. Abantu bakozi basobola okubeeza wegwanga. Actually, okwewola is secondary. Okusasula omusolo is primary. Nti mwaliwadde mwongereza kuzitukoze eki if ze tusasudde. What are the main types of taxes? What tusasula emisolo? Njagala okubategeeza bannayuganda bujjo tubagamba nti gavumenti tigikakatako kutuwa obuweereza because we are all taxpayers. Kati oli wagamba for example alisemba buli mukyala akeera ku makya nagenda nakwata enkumi ye n'alima. Yalowooza tebimukwata kuba tasasula musolo. Abantu balowooza nti okusasula omusolo oteekwa kuba ng'okeera n'ogenda mu ofiisi n'otula ne bakusasula then you pay tax. Nedda. All Ugandans are taxpayers. Taxpayers as long as otuuse emyaka 18 okudda waggulu. You are taxpayer. Actually n'abatannagiweza naye ye abatanaba kutuuka kusasula kubanga talina income eva mu nsawo to do anything. So we have direct and indirect taxes. Direct taxes, these are paid straight to the government based on individual or corporate earnings such as income tax and property tax. Emisolo egiri direct gwe musolo ogwo gwe bakuggyako n'ogufiiringa nti musasudde. For example, bwe mbeera omukozi ne banzijjako pay as you earn, that is a direct tax kubanga bagujja ku nze. Bwe mba nkolera company ne banzijjako 30% corporate tax ogw'omusolo guli deducted directly. Bwe mba nga ngenze n'enkola omulimu mu gavumenti n'enzijjako withholding tax, that is a direct tax. Mujjukire nti company yona for example gavumenti bwekuwa omulimu nti construction say of a 3 classroom block bwebaka ne bamusalako omwenda mu kasanvu n'atwala ekyenda plus oba ekyenda mu esatu. So those are direct taxes, and there are those we call indirect taxes. Indirect taxes are charged on goods and services when you buy. Bw'ogenda n'ogula ekintu, you directly pay a tax. For example, bw'ogenda mu dduuka n'ogula sukali, there is a tax on sugar. Bw'ogula sabuni, there is a tax on soap. So whenever you get money from your pocket and go buy something, you indirectly pay tax, much as you may not recognize it. The most common example of an indirect tax is VAT, the value added tax, VAT, 18% VAT. So that is what an indirect tax means. A tax that is embedded in the final product that you do purchase as a citizen. So, but you are not talking about Musolo, but stakeholders Musolo Bani. Automatically, whenever we talk about the tax, omuntu asooka okujja mu kibalo ye URA. Buli muntu ayogera omusolo omuntu asooka is URA bw'osooka okwogerako. Number one, nti URA evunaanyizibwa direct to payment of tax, I mean to collection of taxes. However, tulina government esetting emisolo, tulina parliament that approves these taxes, tulina the Uganda National Bureau of Statistics, ebala newa data URA. So there are so many stakeholders. However, where does government draw its mandate to collect taxes? This brings us to the legal framework. Article 152 is on taxation. Semateka. Akiriza government okunganya omusolo ngekuja mufu. No tax shall be imposed except under an authority of an act of parliament. Meaning, buli musolo gwolaba ogukyagingibwa parliament eba yaguyisa oba yayagala oba kyali kiguli omusolo guba gulina okukyagingibwa. That is why every financial year government has tax bills. Government will run a budget every financial. If you see a national budget, it has a component of income and revenue. Then if there are proposals of tax bills, all those will be discussed during the budgeting process. That is why, at the time of discussing the budget within the course of the financial year, you will have proposals of the budget in how government will earn and on how government will spend. Those are called the tax proposals, and these must be passed by Parliament. Number two, where a law enacted under clause 1 of this article confers powers on any person or authority to waive over a tax imposed by law, that person or authority shall report to Parliament periodically on the exercise of powers and shall be determined by the law. There is no single tax that can be waived or exempted without the approval of Parliament. If the Ministry of Finance has proposals on tax exemptions, on tax waivers, these must be submitted to Parliament for to get approval. Then 3, Parliament shall make laws to establish tax tribunals for purpose of settling disputes. Every time they set a tax, other people are complaining. You remember the times of IFRIS. Much as IFRIS was not a tax, IFRIS was a means of collecting a tax. IFRIS kwali kuba that government mukwetereza okusolooza omusolo okubadde gulemerayo. A system is a receipting system. And every time I buy something from a shop, for example, I go to a shop, I buy a dress. Give me a receipt, but generated electronically, such that that VAT automatically is received by the URA. So IFRIS was one way of government improving on tax collection. So IFRIS was a tax, but I'm bringing that as an example. Now, Parliament is very important. Parliament ya mugaso nnyo. Bino byonna ebisalibwawo by'affecting obulamu. How do these affect your livelihood? Mujjukire the principles of a good tax. Omusolo omulungi, what are those principles? Tugenda kuziraba. Buteekwa okuba nga tebukosa bannansi, buteekwa okuba nga busobola you can enforce. We are going to look at those principles of a good tax. Kakati mulabye lwaki Mwami Museveni alwana nnyo okulaba nga Parliament yasinzaamu abantu abangi. Ekyo tekyalibadde kibi. Naye ate okusinza abangi nga tubba kalulu, okusinga abangi nga tutta bantu, that's also not good. Leadership or obukulembeze political is a mandate that must be given to you by the people. So otumala okuwa mandate eno otandika otuwa amateeka mwe tulina okutambulira. Bannayuganda wetwongera okubagamba nze I myself nze omwati awagira politics wakugula bintu bino omukulembeze enagulira mbiri nsaba akuyambyeko. Ensonga y'okusasula guno omusolo gavumenti kuwa bisookerwako. We have just concluded the 2024 population census. They gave you statistics on the extent of how government has extended water to the people. How many of Ugandans have access to safe and clean water? Ensonga lwaki isongera yagula ekimotoka ky'amazzi ng'abantu b'ejjinja tebalina mazzi. Era ensongera awo ennyongera okusabira. Well, that is just a minor intervention. Obanga ye a drop of water in the ocean. Government awoswengere yalibadde akusikiriza kugamba nti Uganda, South, in this country, where we have water, Lake Victoria, and all those water bodies, how can we, why don't we have 100% access to safe and clean water? So, some of these things, what the guy does, he buys a water bowser. What happens to that water bowser? Is it EMP to buy fuel for that water bowser? Do they sell to you that water? Or when they bring the bowser, to an MP, is that one sustainable? Because that is what they must do. So those interventions by our dear leaders, but it would be the duty of any government that knows its will and mandate. I saw the honorable seminar where now ambulance. It's good. Naye government etakucheka ambulance system oweza bana Uganda. Kubanga buli MP tubatekako okwakulizo oba obulanzi obusukakawo. That's when you see abakulembeze obusinga bakatebajja because of the cost gye tubatekako. Sikugamba nti omukulembeze takuyambako. Naye nyongera kujukiza government. Nti ababaka bebakoze bisingikiriza government okukomawo okumanya nti ensonga lwaki etujjako omusolo is purely to get access to public services. We are not asking for government to come and cook food in our homes, not. But we are asking for those services that facilitate and a citizenry that is productive. When you are government is lost. When I fall sick, it is the duty of the government okunzijanjalo. Omukyala yaligenza okulenga amanda. Bwalwaza omwana, she will close akabanda akamana. Ekibanda jakigala. Babuza mama nakalwaki takola ennaku zino omwana we yalwala. Lwaki omwana yalwala? Anti yanywa amazzi amachafu. Anti yali ano omwana gwe batagobodde nanywa ebizi ebichafu. So government must know that whenever we are not productive, buli w'omwana bawaiso ne babeera mu kkomera ng'ofiirwa kubanga abaana bawaiso baagala services, baagala amalwaliro, baagala amasomero, baagala amazzi. You will not be able to provide kubanga kubalina okusasula omusolo waiso taliiwo. But as of now, ali dormant, ajja kulagibwa among the dormant taxpayers. You see? So that is why to encourage the government, first of all, decongest prisons. Prisons are a cost to government. A prison is not a productive sector. In the budget for the financial 26-27, when you go on Google, not take the budget for the public of Uganda 26-27, budget yeggwanga nga budget y'amakomera esinga budget y'amasomero ng'esinga budget y'amalwaliro. Reason abantu mu makomera bangi. You see? Abantu mu makomera bangi ate nga government eriisa baliise. So that brings us to the concept of people pay taxes to get services. Now, Article 153, a consolidated fund. There shall be a consolidated fund into which taxes shall be paid. All revenues and other monies raised or received for purpose and on behalf, all in trust of government. Tulina ekitavu nti bwe bakuŋŋaanya omusolo guteekwa okugenda mu kitavu. It is a fund that collects all taxpayers' money. Lwaki tusanga omuntu wajja ku dduuka lye n'akugamba nti bwe tofaayo sente zimpe zikusasulire? Has that money gone to the consolidated fund? Not. Omuntu bw'akujja bw'ogenda, for example, the local government gives you an assessment, which is an invoice, for you to pay a license. Either they reflect a receipt, so that is why we call upon the URA to put measures in place of ensuring that all monies that are charged from the people zigenda mu kitavu. Buli lwozijjako omusolo ne butagenda mu kitavu kya gavumenti mba nfiirwa, mba nkolera bwereere. Kubanga nja kutuuka okusaba services nga tosobola kuzimba because omusolo togukuŋŋaanyiza. So this is where government has so many challenges. First of all, your taxable, your tax register, child one senior, Number two, neither from sorrow to no buy. To buy the loopholes are simply too many to get up zero. On sorrow, abasinga tebasasula n'abatono abasasudde okumune gubbibwa baani abakozi ba gavumenti gubbibwa babbulooka. There's so many things ebyaffectinga gavumenti okulaba nti omusolo tegutuuka ku kitavvu. So tukkiriza nti gavumenti eteeka okuddamu omusolo era eteeka okubaako weegirwa okukuŋŋaanyiza. Kaakati wano bwe tunaaba tudda mu interview eddako next Wednesday tujja kulaba bwe tumala okussa omusolo wano mu kitavvu guvaawo gutya. How does money leave the consolidated fund? Sente zivaawo zijja ogenda zikola oluguudo. Era how does government prioritize the money that we pay as taxpayers? How does government how does government take decisions on how to allocate our money? That should be the next, it's going to be our next discussion. Yes, that we've paid the tax, whichever little that we have, how has government invested our money? Mujukire zino sente zaffe. Yosokate kusera binamba nze bwe nali semba era nkyaliyo mbagamba nti gavumenti etuyamba buyambi otuwa services. Nedda gavumenti ekola buvunaanyizibwa bwayo bw'eba tuyamba buyambi tuwe services tedda mutuwa musolo sati tedda mutujjako musolo sente zaffe zeyalibadde tujjako ku musolo ffe twekolere mu nsonga zaffe. But as long as government still collects taxes, it is mandatory. Not to budget, it is mandatory to pay a tax. I want to remind Mr. Museveni and his team, it is mandatory for you to provide social services, social-based services to the people. It is non-negotiable. The tweeters are obvious. We know when I'm a son, so what is the effect? Then, Article 155, financial estimates. The President shall cause to be prepared and laid before Parliament each financial year, but in any case not later than the 15th day before commencement of the financial year, on estimates of revenue and expenditure of government for the next financial year. Budget. Who does the allocation? The executive, using its technical team, does the allocation of the budget. Government ekola national development plan ey'emyaka etaano omwo mwejja byegenda okukolera, for example in the financial year katuli mu mwaka gw'ensimbi 2026-2027 emisolo gyonna gy'olaba gisasulwa enteekateeka ya Museveni ne banne omusolo a moment, excuse me, make sure please last make sure you don't make noise. Number 2, please, madam, a moment. So, madam, we're sorry, we have a class. We shall. They have come to learn. Later, please first go out. Later, they'll come and join us. So, I was saying, every financial year, preparation of the budget. Would you like President is the chief finance officer of this country. Honorable Musasi is the current Minister of Finance and his team. Bayamba omukulembeze w'eggwanga. So, buli w'olaba omusolo gwonna gwe bakuggyeeko, gavumenti bwe beeteeseteese. Gino emisolo gavumenti yeri mu kiyungu ne giyisibwa Parliament. It is the Parliament that approves these taxes. However, oli akubuuza emisolo gyonna egijja mu Parliament giyisibwa mazima n'obwenkanya oba wabaawo collusion. Ndoza mutegedde ensonga lwaki bulijjo tubagamba nti buli kyolaba kiyise ekirungi ekibi ebyo byonna eba manifesto ya gavumenti eri muyinza. So njagala mumanye nti buvunaanyizibwa bwa mukulembeze w'eggwanga okuteekateeka sets up under this constitution shall cause to be submitted to the president at least 2 months before the end of the financial year estimates of administrative and development expenditure and estimates of revenue of the respective departments of the organization. Now, omukulembeze w'eggwanga budget ogenda mu executive evaawa eva mu bitongole bya government. That's why we say a budget should be bottom up. In every financial year, buli local government ewa proposals mu ngeri mutya bwegenda okukungaanya omusolo. Remember, there are taxes at a national level and taxes at a local level. For the comments, I'll be getting the comments later, but also now after this discussion, we are going to have and answer question session. We're going to have it. That didn't happen last time, but this time around, please prepare your questions. Brief. When we give you an opportunity to submit, within 2 minutes, you must have submitted. That's why I also have 1 hour. When it ends, I will close. Within 1 hour, we make submission. An hour, it will be a one-on-one discussion on your, suggestions, proposals, and these others. So, for those in the comment section, type your questions. For those who will ask directly, we shall get to you. Government has power to borrow or lend. The public debt. Government will have, again, when we prepare an estimate of revenues, government is preparing okunganya ebisolo mu bantu, ate era ne preparing okwewola. That's why we are going to see the resource envelope. Government eyingiza etya emisolo. Why this topic now? Lwaki nalowoozezza ku kulaba nga tutunulira government eyingiza etya? Kubanga ebiseera ebisinga buli okusaba services batugamba government terina ssente. Why does government, why is it that government has no money? Why doesn't government have money? The exception, 107 and the team, lwaki temulina ssente? Ffe tugamba tusasula omusolo. Era mugenda ne mwewola. Why do we always have deficit budgets? Why is the budget performance low? Lwaki bw'omusuubiza ebintu in the course of the financial year? Lwaki temubikola? N'olaba bagamba nti oluguudo lwaki abakuza mateete olugenda December lumaze emyaka 2 nga gavumenti ebusuubiza era n'etalutuukiriza. Why do you make empty promises within the budget? Bajja kugamba nti why Musasiza ajja kugamba nti he has already said that and his PS go nti government expenditure depends on the cash flows. Naffe tuspendinga okusinziira ku ssente zetufunye. Then why do you balloon the budget? Lwaki mwesuubiza bye mutaatuukirize? That is the reason why we have this topic today. Government yeteekateeka otuweereza nga bannayuganda. It tells us in every course of the financial year that we shall collect this money, we shall borrow this, and this is how we shall spend it. Then we ask, why is budget performance low? Lwaki tusuubiza ebintu tutabituukiriza? Lwaki enguudo tugamba abantu okuteekegala mu ddwaliro ne bitabeerayo? Gavumenti etuyiwa musolo oba ebba mubbe. Where is the problem? Tusasula, where is the leakage? Kubanga ffe omusolo tugubawa. That is the assumption at this level. Ffe tusasudde omusolo. Mr. Government, omusolo oguteekawa wetukuwa. That is why we have this topic now. Uganda faces a growing crisis of business closures driven by aggressive tax enforcement. Bwebajja mu misolo eno ekisooka business closure tugenda bitunayo wansi. Business ezisinga zigudde. Abasinga tugamba business zituguddeko misolo. Mugenda kugira emisolo emingi etusasula. Overlapping obligations baleka business gakavaako emisolo mingi. Omuntu yogera ku makya n'ogulawo ekibanda ky'amanda oba wakakigula boti nga local authority ejja town council leeta sente za license nga landlord ajja njagala rent ow'amazzi ajja ow'amasannyalaze ajja ow'akasasiro ajja. All those are taxes. Ebyo byonna misolo. There are those that are collected directly and those that are collected indirectly. So at times these overlapping obligations cause businesses to fail. The multiple taxation emisolo nga mingi nga bwe mbibagambye. Omuntu bw'agenda okusuubula from China n'ogenda ku customs bakiriyayiza ebintu byo n'obireeta awo nosasudde omusolo. Ozze otedde mu dduuka sasula licensi sasula amazzi sasula amasannyalaze mujjukire. What determines the cost of a unit of electricity? Gavumenti ejja omusolo ku masannyalaze. Kati buli gavumenti bwejjako omusolo mungi ku masannyalaze mbagambye taxes is affecting a business ziri both direct and indirect. Omusolo gwowa direct bw'otuula. I want to ask a question. Bw'otuula mu business yo mu dduuka lyo n'otuulamu bw'otuula mu bitabo emisolo emeka gy'osasula nga ogiwaddeyo direct? Misolo emeka gy'osasula nga indirect bagikusazeeko? Jjukira naye bw'obeera mu dduuka lyo bw'ogula sabbuuni osasudde omusolo. Kubanga jjukira edduuka balikirininga, edduuka olina abakozi bwaba nga batuuse mu threshold esasula VAT, esasula payers money, bajja kusasula. All those are taxes. A low taxable base. Small and medium-sized enterprises bear a heavy burden from this pressure. leading to short business lifespans, widespread public distrust of URA and heavy reliance on national borrowing to plug budget supports. Because of business the government Kakati, look at these statistics. What are we doing? As we struggle to pay taxes, around our business to Zikweka, our you know, you work day and night or dodgy taxes. Now here we are. I want you to pay attention seriously. Over half of all registered taxpayers on the URA list did not contribute any revenue to the government in the financial year 2025-2026. And the report here, Auditor General, Jimumaka Guardian Simbi, Billy Mweta, Muka. This year, URA, only half of registered taxpayers paid. The analysis indicated that the tax register has 5.2 million people or businesses, million ton of the taxpayers as at 30th June 2025. Only one of the highlights, I want you to highlight 5.2 million registered taxpayers. Then come to only 2.5 million, representing 48%, remitted some taxes during the financial year, leaving approximately 2.7 million taxpayers, 52% without contributing any tax. Oh! Lord, how do you feel where you are? The government here, was a budget here, never mentioned $1 million. What happens? Half million billion, actually it is even slightly lower than half. Million billion H2, Bokabe Rasa Slow Solo, Nabuko Bitundu, Anam Munana Kuchikumi, the Rasa Slow Solo. Nepurakayo, million billion when it was 52% of us didn't pay taxes. Kakati yao government ni chitufu baka yokucheke dagala mdwani chitufu embudo zidu derinya chitufu Kampala agongange kube itonye kubange myala bibi chitufu embudo ze Masaka bazizimba na ze Bunyanga obwe chitufu tebasobodde tuwa access to safe and clean water abesemba bula amazzi lwaganyambiddwa naye wasasula omusolo. Did you pay tax? Obana wali kuduka oba bakusibanga muwanga business negwa ebintu bye tubagamba wano wewali ekinyusi. What are the reasons as to why you are getting those sentences? Next time Katonda nga nyambe lend money, we know the reasons as why they didn't collect this money. Some businesses closed. Ezimu tezakola magoba because corporate tax is paid upon profits. When Master was in Magoba, I will not pay tax. Business endala. Bado ojinga bekweka. Buli wamuga okusasula omusolo. Buli wategera bwala babala license nga bajja. Ngagala wedduka. Bagamba gundi yafiirwa. Kumbe aganye buganye kusasula. This statistics is very alarming to a low-developed country as Uganda. Bino bimalamu amaanyi. Bitegeeza bano abantu banga bali mu kirasi tebagenda kusobola genda mu UP kusangayo teacher. Kitegeeza teacher government egenda kulwawo okusasula kubanga government can only katino kantu bagambe when government borrows money, that money is for capital development. Government cannot borrow money to meet its current obligations like paying the employees. Okusasula abakozi ba government trillions zirika tezigenda okwekumi mu budget. They automatically must pay you using the taxpayers' money. So that is the reason as to why government should get concerned about the welfare of its people. Mani Museveni never know. Buli wendwala mulina kusula nga temwebase. Buli wamuteeka ku gunkenke actually mwe mufiirwa. Njala Mani Museveni Museveni amanye nti bannayuganda bwe baba n'emirembe kiyamba gwe buli bannayuganda baba balamu kiyamba gavumenti kubanga omulamu yakola omulamu yasasula omusolo buli wembanga siri active if I'm non-productive I'm a cost and a loss to the government. Asset ya government gyesookerako for survival is me now government and you the citizen of the Republic of Uganda. Bw'ogenda okukola obwakadaama yonna gy'ogenze n'ofunirayo ebizibu n'obeera mu kiyumba nga tokola gavumenti yefiirwa kubanga wali kuleva externalization ewandiise nti tufulumiza abantu emitwalo 2 ogenda bakole naye ku mitwalo 2 egifulumye mitwalo 10 gyokka gyegikola kitegeeza oli non-productive ensonga lwaki wonna afuna ebizibu ng'ogamba gavumenti enyamba enkomyewo mukadde oyatunda kibanja gwe ogenda okola gavumenti oyagala egiwe ekukomyewo ng'obadde tosasula musolo era n'abalala baliyo ne beebuuza nti fe bakadaama omutujjako omusolo nga gavumenti gutuyamba ki nga bwetufuna ebizibu tutandika kukuba amasimu ng'omubaka wange namugamaama nyamba bannange gundi nkwatiraako wano ebyo byonna bye bireetera abantu okudooginga omusolo kadaama yeebuuza nze bwe musasula nfuniramu we so singa nfuna any leverage egudooginga awo mangu bwegudikude omuntu yena wano mu Uganda buli muntu alina bizinesi bwafuna omukisa ogudooginga omusolo opportunity agikozesa so this is a wake up call to URA bannaffe abali mu buyinza because URA just third party buli omusolo guno ogutavaale gwe tusooka okunenya emwa Museveni ettiimiye bino bye tubamba balamu ne bannammeere nabagamba luli nti balamu obudde bwamala ng'akola ddukaduka ng'ofiirwa strategically balamu alina otuuli agenda balaga wansi eno emisolo egiva mu local government bitono nnyo balamu teyalisookeddeko do local governments pay taxes bomba temuleeta misolo lwaki this is a strategic position of a minister nyokulaba minister n'omuyambiro nga bonna bali mu ddukaduka bali eno babisowa desemba bwe baddukawo badde eno njagala nkule gwe nga munnansi oba ofiirwe that is part of follow up and oversight on how our money is used naye enkola gikikolebwamu eteekwa okuba structured nga tefiiriza munnansi that is why when you look at a pyramid of operation of any institution that is formed tubeerako ba leaders abali strategic abali operational level you know all those levels so this is why buli avunaanyizibwa eno information mbi nnyo eri eggwanga ekisooka okudooginga omusolo kibi bwagukolekinga obunziba bwokukolekinga n'obubba kibi kubanga omukyala afanga azaala emulago bwe yagenze nabba omusolo bwe tuvunaana kubanga eddagala terituukidde mu budde abasawo tebabasasulidde mu budde n'abasawo abaliyo tebamala lwaki tulina a 29% staffing in all the health sector why kubanga gavumenti etugamba nti terina busobozi bubasasula ebyo natugenda kutunula. This raises questions about the accuracy of the register and the authority's ability to enforce compliance. Bana for URA, what are you doing? Do we have rights, office bearers? Ministry of Finance, do we have the right people occupying those offices? Getubagamba mu recruitment mujema abouganda bakona ab'emikwano kubanga batumuteeka ku deski y'emisolo twagala misolo ng'omutanyiriziddwa nga gwabukuŋŋaanya tokalubiriziddwa ate nga mugasizaamu waddeyo kubanga gwe bw'odooginga hitha n'asasula kitegeeza nti hitha oba omuliddemu olukwe kubanga ye obuvunaanyizibwa bwabukoze ate goreti n'atakola buvunaanyizibwabwe oba Daniel n'atakola buvunaanyizibwabwe so kitegeeza nti obulagajjavu bwange bwina bukukosa. Of those who did pay taxes, over 1 million were employees. Kakati tuzeewo ku percentage wana never married wa mujja omukazi naye ate nina obalaga emisolo lwaki gye mugenda okusasula now kubanga 5 million mu emitwalo 5 abaasasula of those over 1 million were employees kati kubani akakadde kamu baali bakozi be bajjako pay as you earn. You see? Then, leaving fewer contributors among businesses and self-employed taxpayers. What does it mean? Inchi, abasinga mu business n'omusolo abasinga baadooginga. Kaakati kitegeeza nti formal sector compliant because you have next escape route. Omusolo guli deducted directly or wayagala what you have pay as you earn is automatic. Naye eno mu businesses endala abantu bayiya ne batetenkanya engeri y'okulootinga omusolo. Kakati ddala ddala abantu bano okadde obubiri okadde kumpi okumukkiriza 50. That is the take home. Government obunaanyiza obudde bwe mumala nga munoonya bannamugga, obudde bwe mumala nga musimanyi musiba abaana baffe, obudde bwe tumala nga twabudactinga, we can be more productive than that. Tusobola okukola ebiyamba bannansi. Ono statistics yekka is an enlightenment ku gavumenti ya Mwami Museveni. Statistics ono asoomooza gavumenti evaayo. Our backclass members are ready to go. Please don't make noise. Bino is an enlightenment to government. You cannot take away politics. You cannot do away politics in this. Bino offices na bakola yabateekayo. Bani abakulira ebitongole bino baliruddawo. Kakati ne tuva wano, I was the deputy chair of public accounts committee. And a report for the processing. Parliament is very banita, Mozambique must specify parliament. Never let them sovereignty bill, they work to put a name or Gravanga, Bino, our Tuan. And I got a lot of when I see some or Gravanga, or the general's report to the Sava. Kanipotuna ambayo kwasomesa government yayingiza ekisasanyeta nga twandika obbaleta reports z'ebitongole bya government zezireese ku bukya government bwetuweereza. How we are serviced and served by the government. Kakati olina abaana agamba nti namuga mukuseera muba mu politics bino nze nabikola. You cannot do away with politics in ways tosobola. Ensonga lwaki bino byonna bitubirina ze ziri reasons zekozeki zembawadde. So that is it. That was the Auditor General's report, meaning that the tax burden, meaning that the burden of taxation is carried by relatively a small group of compliant businesses. Bambi abatona basobola okusasula ne beetikka emigugu gy'abalala. The Auditor General also observed that while the URA invested heavily in growing the tax register, you remember the expansion program, the Livelihood trade. They went to every local government and opened up offices. Increasing the tax base. What did they do in the course of the year? You have so many dormant taxpayers in your register. You have so many businesses that closed in your tax register. One would like to ask, is your tax register automated? Do you have a direct linkage between you and your taxpayers? When closing a business in Anamugabore, you are at when do you know that Namuga has closed the shop? When do you know that abakozi abali mu company yagundi yaggalawo? When do you know? So that is for URA. Yensonga lwaki tubagamba nti abakozi ba government bakola kinene nnyo okulaba nti bonna Uganda ofuna obuweereza. Naye the government bino byonna tubyogera, it is the government kubanga bano bonna bakolera government yekola selection and choice. Now here we are understanding the national budget. Omwaka gw'ebyensi bibiri ali mukaaga abiri musanvu gavumenti yagamba budget egenda kuba ya trillions 84.3. Domestic revenue gavumenti yagamba egenda kuŋŋaanya trillions 45.96 trillion. That is the tax revenue. And a non-tax revenue of, from this 45, tax revenue is 40.16 and non-tax revenue is 4. Where do we get the non-tax revenue? Ebitongole bya government bitwasuza emisolo. Nga stamp duty, when you go to an office of government, nga bakugamba nti omanyi bw'oba oyagala sitampu sasula emitwalo 2. Muva ku bino ebya 10% ebyabakyamani b'ebisiwa. That is not part of the taxes. The 10% is illegal and irregular. Yali mu mateeka. But we shall get back to the stamp duty. How many, when we go to those offices, the NTR, bw'ogenda emulango n'osasula sente za scan. That is a non-tax revenue to government. You see? Bw'ogenda emulango ne bagamba apart from the scans, which are the services they pay for. So any service gy'osasula mu bitongole bya government, that is a non-tax revenue for government. So ebitongole bya government birina sente ze bikuŋŋaanya okusobola okubawa obuweereza. That is called NTR. So ku sente ezo oluwambuza petroleum fund, sente zirina okuva ku sente ze ez'amafuta n'awabadde tunatandika gayiggula. There is this 1.4 trillion from the petroleum fund. Mwani Baram, local government zozonna, district echumi anamo mukara. Cities, how many cities do we have? How many capital cities do we have? How many tax town councils? Yes, boom, 339.97 billion from all the local governments. Baram, we have a lot of work here. Tumenyeka, ungamukaba, you know, government, the local government. Name was Mukunganya Zagawa, or who people sort of Bunji, local government. So those are some of the strategic areas that we're going to know. How do we get taxes from local government so that we can serve the people? Where is our government? If you are Masaka district local government, why do you request for services? Yet you don't pay taxes. Domestic borrowing. Government again about trillion, sorry, trillion 11.7 trillion domestic borrowing. Domestic debt refinancing. Domestic debt refinancing, this is money that ought to be paid. But what government does is it instead pays interest on this money. Then we have external financing of projects, 11.27 trillion. This is external borrowing of banks of very well. Domestic borrowing. This is a very big threat. The government again on commercial banks. Again to the treasury bills and bonds. But the government will all like China obviously competition between government and the people. When it was financial year 25-26, government domestic borrowing trillions. One did a commitment. Now we are going to make sure that as government we reduce on the domestic borrowing such that we reduce the competition with our people from banks. Why does government look at the external financing of projects? The 11.27 trillion, 11.9 trillion, 97. Actually, the internal borrowing is more than the external. Government. This is the threat. External loans are cheaper. They are payment terms and conditions are long term. Domestic borrowing, these are short term loans. Zino. About the cost of capital. Government, 17, remember during the State of the Nation address, 17 made a commitment of reducing on the domestic borrowing. Mr. Msasizi and your team, why are we seeing this? Why are we borrowing more domestically than externally? As a government, you are no longer attractive. Because our fiscal space is very limited. So businesses get frustrated. Domestic borrowing is costly to the people and it brings in competition between the people and government. Core issues in Uganda's tax environment, multiple taxation to an aggressive environment, high failure rates. When multiple taxation, small businesses face overlapping central and local government levies, licenses, both directly and indirectly. The business of the aggressive environment. The Uganda Revenue Authorities frequently ramps up pressure and issues large sudden demand notices to meet steep national collection targets. You are setting a target in the world. Chokatax BCIA once. Katin Zeranga compliant. Mera Kuduka. Mujukile business is Kiatanga business once. You see? So this is where we are. High failure rates, high tax burdens combined with complex filing procedures cause many enterprises to collapse before reaching their second year. We're not now consecutively we are handling how the taxes impact on your business. We're not going to be better. Now, revenue shortfalls. Despite heavy pressure on formal enterprises, collections often miss the targets, forcing government into heavy domestic borrowing. But we are taxpayers in immediate return. Only to pay. Sometimes backward in back and government borrows money to pay salaries. When you fail to pay taxes, the government has a heavy bill on recurrent expenditure. At times in domestic borrowing, government yesanga ekoseza sente zaffe ezageze mu capital development nezikosa mu kusasula abakozi. Mumanyi lwaki external borrowing ebakalubirire? Ezo sente ziri condition, ziriko obukwakulizo obungi notojabagamba nti newozo sente okuzimba for example Jinja Expressway nosanga muzipite mu kalulu ka $2.6 naye zino ze bajja mu treasury bills, zino ze bazze mu commercial banks, it is easy to divert. Conditions zaayo just first of all very expensive, and the terms and conditions government can easily bypass. Era njagala obategeeza nze nsuubira ensonga lwaki government eborrowing domestically sente zaffe ezagenda mu kalulu nyingi. Most of the money was used in elections. Kakati wasanga nga balina deficit nene. Kati that's why muddayo obulisi. Mind this doesn't mean that you should be an economist. I don't have to be a tax expert of money. Weddayo otunuulire structure akondala mubba ekifaananyi ofune omuntu yenna ategeerera ebisolo akunnyonnyole the implication economically eyakano era akubuulire performance yawano mu domestic revenues, omuwulire whether business zikula bukuzi oba zikulozinga. Ajja kuwulira nti chances ez'okutuuka wano ziri very low. 84 kitegeeza budget y'omwaka gw'ebyensimbi guno erimu obulimba bungi. Ebisinga tebijja kutuukirizibwa because of the sources of funding. Where is government going to get money? Ekyo kikonyanga munnayuganda okumanya nti gwe gavumenti era oliwa buvunaanyizibwa nnyo. So bino tubibagambye, despite the heavy pressures of the formal sector, here misses the targets, forcing government to borrow heavily. Mujirabi example Mujirabi. Because of non-performance, domestic borrowing, Mujirabi, how can we plan to borrow domestically higher than the external? You see, you can use somebody wants to please use this and buy better. Now, when we're worried Kalvanywera, as you pay the interest of very well, at pay extra interest times how many? Uganda has no approved national tax policy. Much as it is these 40 years of the NRM government, government here Uganda, China approved the tax policy. The last time I was in Parliament, Mimes has told us that it is still in draft. Government is processing one. Meanwhile, what does government rely on? The Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development is in the final stages much of preparing the tax policy. The policy is meant to provide a set of guidelines for taxation of goods and services as a vital tool for revenue mobilization. What are the consequences of not having a tax policy in that Gwanga? Bitukomyawo ku tax register. And approved tax policy ejja kuyamba to provide long-term set guidelines on how kakati guidelines zaali badde batuwa zaali badde operationalizing a tax policy. Now government is using currently, the country is guided by the domestic revenue mobilization strategy. Making amendments on tax laws every year makes the tax law very unpredictable. Buli mwaka tukola amendments to tax laws, and this makes high unpredictability of taxes. That's why there is a high swing, very unpredictable. A country without a tax policy, and it does expect to collect revenues. Every time politics, it's not politics. Why this topic? The high rate of collapse of small and medium enterprises, about 66 to 90% of SMEs collapse within their first year. About 66 to 90% of SMEs, small and medium enterprises, collapse within their first year of operation. And roughly 70 to 80% fail before reaching their third anniversary. Business is equal to when your neighbor closes his shop, To you does it matter? Mulirwana obagala edduuka weebuuza lwaki agaddewo eyali asuubula e China omwaka ogusooka ogw'obuli bw'atandika okusuubulako gwe nga takyasobola kugenda China. To you olina ekibuuzo kye weebuuza oba ogamba bugambi bwatyo bwayagadde. Bw'obeera ne kapita atakula weebuuza lwaki kapita wange takula? Because the assumption would be buli mwaka nja kuba nkula era we must use as a business. I must know the reasons as to why business yange tekola ki tekola. Long-term survival is similarly rare. Data indicating that only 8% of business survival for the 15 years or more. Only 58% of businesses survive. 8%. This means there is a high rate of business failure. I won't know. Banna the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. One over the money of business zigwa. Federal government obudde bwebamala mukola ekyayamba bannansi waliwo okuyamba abantu okulaba kutya bwe twongera businesses okusurvivinga is good enough for the country. Business yo bwesurvivinga teweetaaga kukubira MP akuyambeko mu lumbe. Government yeetaaga kuwa tenti na butebe ku kyalo teweetaaga masefuliya because you can survive. Ngenda nembabuuza bwabanga emirimu gyammwe gitambula bulungi obuduuka bw'omukyalo butambula emwanyi erina akabeeyi nga purchasing power eri waggulu temusobola kwesondamu katebe buli mwaka ne mweguliranga ekyalo. So twesanga in the life of compromise because of such effects. Then fewer than 10% family businesses survive past the original founder. Wano wakulu ebitundu 10 ku businesses ezisurvivinga nga nanyini yo founder wali afuga. Mutunulye business kategeze za bamulwani. Look at the BMK. I'm citing a few examples, but there are those ababadde mu informally wansi. Bwembanga gundi mama nachi alina akaduuka, mama nachi naafa. Kyaseza akaduuka kano okusigalawo ziri ebitundu 10. Igwalye yatudde kino kyenjogero kirabamu amakulu. Lwaki family businesses zigwa? Kati government yalibadde esomesa abantu. Wano abakola research ono statistics yaleetera abantu okukola muwokola research. This is already research. Kati omuntu eyalibadde ati government yalibadde tuna nti lwaki family businesses zigwa? Lwaki businesses esurviving? Our government yalimalidde obudde in the interest of building a productive population. Questions. Have you ever bothered to ask your neighbor why they closed shop? Are you interested in how many taxes your business pays? Do taxes have any impact on your profits? If yes, how? And other direct and indirect costs, do they have an impact on the profits that you make? Do you know that your taxes contribute to your business survival? Again, as we do proceed. Underlying systemic pressures. Informal sector strain. Most economic activity remains informal and untaxed, concentrating tax weight onto a narrow pool of formal taxpayers. Government and informal sector. Sometime back when I was still working with Masaka Municipal Council, government came up and said all borders should not pay taxes. They even stayed payment of taxes by taxis. It was for 2 months. But what's a musoro? Kakati owaboda akube engalo. Mwami Museveni atuggyeko omusolo banaye Katonda mulungi. N'owa tax n'akuba engalo. Bannange Mwami Museveni atuggyeko omusolo. Do you know the impact of operating a business that does not pay tax? Bw'obeera mu business etasasula musolo, omanyi ky'ofiibwanga munnansi. Bw'owa bodaboda wali weebuuzizzaako lwaki gwe nkuba weetonya ogenda wansi wa petrol station. Do you know the risk? Jofna, nobody find it, and go and all the bodabodas are packed below the petrol stations. Mumanyi ensonga lwaki stages zammwe teziri gazetted era teziri, they are not structured. Boba kati no stage ya bodaboda enkuba bwetonya n'esanga ku stage negamawa ngowa bodaboda olabwo bakugamba okola bodaboda si kibonerezo. It's not a punishment. Buvunanyizibwa bwa gavumenti baleka mbabuli within the informal sector bodaboda ekyasiza okugaba kuwa abantu obulimi. That's why when you go in Kampala, bodaboda zisinga abatakisi obungi. Bodaboda zijja okusinga abantu batambula obungi. So gwe wagamba nti business yo tegenda kusasula wadde ekikumi, kitegeeza nti gavumenti ejja kubawo okulowoozaako. Because You don't contribute. In some aroma, Ngoboda Jeko Jaletia, 91 Kamuti. Wamaju and Kamuti, Nagan and I, your customer was to. I don't know that who don't need a jacket. So, and then your working environment should be the interest of government. But we won't put it up, we will never say about a fair, we would have fair, the same way you start, child, my symbol, and database, you know, you get agency of money. Then would in other parts of the country. No sang when I bought that I didn't do them if we can hardly recognize the face. Or mother no Muslim Fufidoria or Bakasakona, Sukenya, Kasakumeta. But what I'm going to be the punishment, government must be questioned. What you will now see, I call them better. So, this informal sector, government, take care. Government must prepare for the informal sector. When the government has taken the move or Kuzimbo time, those planned markets. But there are so many areas, the one of Taliban, no Sangamama, as the Nomana or Kolam. What they have is an umbrella. Umbrella, the water, the water, a baby gave us one. And Kuaneja, the Momiaka. What happens? I looked at some business, I looked at some money. Never will get one. That means it is old fashioned. Or Wanga or Taro will gazette about Tawina shelter. I tell you, Taliban. Or if the shows up on the government yard, but they take out, she's shelter, permanent shelter, no chiva, Nagazin, frame, chili roofed. Or Nagan and will call Catalonia, but when it's not the permanent market, we don't. So, government will get access to some just know. I give you the money. I got it. Simple service. I'm sorry. I'm a footer. Every little I don't get to be matter. Katama was on politically, Nagenda Mafta. Kagati Bagenda Mafta, but Japloza never is after just a number customer. What you might to a Congress every week, I'm going to have a price of Zimbabwe. After Ezimu factors is beyond the Guanga affair, but Ezimu factors is within our country. And going over that when I always am after, then the charge will automatically be transferred to the customer. Kakati no Tamanyanti means the Namuka, when not one is a cent, our data and Mirundi, Yakamla, our data in your border, Yakamza, Kakati now don't wear up stage in the Tokola. So never think. Direct tax staying impact kumulimo. Igwe, Bruateka as Tokunyanja, Guadatu de Vina, which took a chip to I won't purchase it. So whenever there are so many indirect taxes in items and the consumables, there's a purchasing power again that came there. A few will buy because they cannot afford. Sukari, ewaffe mu byalo yasiganya kubawa abaana bato abakulu tebanya sukari. Number 2, ebyo omukyakula ng'ekitole omutibwa sabbuuni. Naye kaakati akatole ka sabbuuni ak'olukumi bw'okaleeta omukazi ayinza n'okunywa kubanga tekasobola nakwoza bintu. See? So that's why we have governance and trust, citizens and business owners report low trust in tax authorities. Abantu bakyagala kuddukirira musolo, so ebyo bitu affecting that. Sources of government income and choose of the we collect tax, indirect and direct taxes from local governments. The other one is at national, from local government, local service tax, social property tax and ground rent. Abantu bamenyi okubeera ne poloti mu kibuga. Okubeera ne poloti mu kibuga nga yiri empty, abantu bamenyi okugisasula. You pay for it. Ground rent is paid because the poloti is tannakola mu Livelihood gazette. Then the property tax cuisine. Then licensing and permits. And the licenses and permits. The move from local governments. Ogenda kugula wakatale, ogenda kumuoza, all those licensing, there's a trade license. Whether you have paid these other taxes or not, these others you must pay. Now, why don't we have a 2 minutes break? Time to get me a bottle of water. 1 minute kubawo omulambo. Mumulema dakiika nga 2 teacher asobole okunywa ku tuzzi. Teacher asobole okunywa ku tuzzi, a break of 2 minutes. As they bring my water, Kadaka Bay, we cannot, we must be considerate first of all of your time and of the conductor. Income tax. Income tax. But if you saw when you get automatically we need to get it. This is the Income Tax Act, Cap 340. Section 4 is charge on income tax. Income tax is a tax on profits of businesses and incomes of individuals. But the income is so income tax is from business and individuals. This applies generally to all persons who derive income, whether an individual bodies or corporate companies. When they are income tax, that is the pay as you earn. When they are business when bank company, the big companies will charge the corporate tax. Income tax is imposed on 3 broad categories of income: business income, employment income, and property income. Honorable teacher, school, this is not UPE, please. Because I know, in school, do they, as they teach, do they take water? That is it. But that is them. This is not UPE. Anyway, that is on the lighter notes. Most taxes imposed are self-assessed. The self-assessment system imposes the taxpayer. And for instance, responsibility for calculating taxable income and the tax due on that income. So these are some of these taxes are self-assessed. Now, tax say pay as you earn. Sasula ngoyingiza is pay as you earn. Tax on employment income. Buli mukozi gobawe barua nti ofunye omulimu asasula pay as you earn. Naye si buli omu. There is a threshold. Government yayongeza kati eri ku mitwalo 33 around there. Buli ayingiza income ya 32,223. Kati government yazongeza nti bw'osukka 35 ojja kusasula omusolo. For example, if teacher Helen earns Uganda shillings 1 million per month, her employer deducts pay before paying her, meaning the take home is less than the income. Deductions together is about 1,000 on how the income taxes, the pay is deducted. The corporation tax, joint corporate tax, tax on company profits. But when a company, you will pay a corporate tax of 30%. For example, a commercial bank in Kampala declares a profit of 10 billion. From 10 billion, 3 billion goes to government. You see? Withholding tax. Withholding tax. Where have we gone? Not. Hey, withholding tax. This is section 144 and 118 of the tax collected at source. So this withholding is collected at source. This is the withholding tax. It also has a law on withholding tax. Now, if a contractor or say Rihanna construction company, a full minimum in Zimbabwe district local government to construct a classroom block at 100 million, the contractor will pay a withholding tax of 6%. So therefore, it is not only withholding company, but for this time, we're talking about withholding tax alone. So it is anti. But contract with para. Now, this takes me back to there was a government decision. Government yakola decision that all contracts of construction, emirimu gy'okuzimba classroom blocks, amalwaliro zigende mu UPDF engineering brigade. Ngegamba mbu bacontractor bali expensive. That is area the area mu ekyasinze okunyuma. We know the UPDF engineering brigade is cheaper than the private contractors. Naye government bwe yali ejajinga teyatunuulira broadly on what a private company goes through. Private companies zino zikozesa capital waazo, borrowed money, high and expensive capital wa bei, bagenda babiddinge, basasule emisolo, asasula abakozi olw'okumusasula. Naye ng'afunye omulimu yono aleta capital we gwe n'omuwa business ye n'akola n'omusasula. You will pay either interim certificates oba ogenda musasula ng'amaze. N'omugeraageranya ku UPDF engineering brigade gy'osasula upfront, UPDF bagigulira buli kimu in advance. Era sente ze bagiwadde bwe ziggwawo awo ekoma. That is why across the country mulina emirimu mingi stories egya UPDF brigade engineering. Kubanga government batandika ku buzimbe ne gukomawo government erina sente, so the UPDF cannot continue because government has no money. So government when a decision yamwe yokosa UPDF, we appreciate muyinza okubanga mwagala abasirikale bafune emirimu, naye you must revise it. Omwaka gw'ebyensimbi 2026 when government was closed, the Auditor General's report yalaga nti we had letters of credit which was worth 615 billion. Nti billion mukaaga zasigala nga ziri idle for accounts because of the capacity of the UPDF engineering brigade. Number 2, government under say the government when people offer services to government neta basasula. Government ebanjibwa over 15 trillion in domestic areas. What is that domestic areas? Era kade bagane ebinebine ebyemisolo, omuntu bamujjako omusolo, alina okusasula abakozi, alina okukola biki, naye asaplayinga government neta musasula. Also the issue of domestic areas is something which frustrates the private sector. Abantu bawa government business, government ebawa business, ne bamala okukola government neta sasula. Era ebimu causes biri ebyobutasasula misolo, the government erina sente, so it will not pay its obligations. In any case, why should you commit yourself to the government when you don't have money? So ensonga eyo neyo so tax rates for individual businesses, katugenda kutandika okukuba ekibalo individual business. The income tax rate for individual businesses depend on the income bracket. Fenna katulina obuduuka emisolo gye batujjako directly gidependinga ku capital ne returns zokola. Resident individuals enjoy a tax-free annual income with a threshold. Buli income kyemujja kizza eno income yalinga tutali ku millioni emitwalo 23-25 per month. Naye kati ejja kulinnya because income government yagamba nti taxable income erina kuba mitwalo 3 plus. Kakati bw'okola a resident individual ye Munnayuganda. Munnayuganda enjoys a threshold of UDX 2.8 per annum. Bw'oba nga tuweza million 2.8 omwezi togenda kusasula income tax. The balance is taxed at 10%, 20% and 30% depending on the income bracket. Individuals who earn above 120 million pay per annum pay an additional 10% for that extra 120. And ekibalo kiri wano now 0 to 2.8 million chargeable income tosasula for residents abatali ba residents abatali bannayuganda 10% egyalisasula. Kati bw'ojja wano waddako wakati wa million 2 to million 4 ogenda kusasula 10%. Kakati calculator ani agirirawo gamba yeye atukusimuye. Kakati what you are going to do ogenda come back ogenda kwata million 2 otoleko 4 million minus 2 million bw'onazikolako balance ogenda mukubisamu 10% gyemitwalo 12 mukitegeera 10%. Kati bwe tunaagenda wano ewaddako 4 million ng'oli mu range ya 4 million to 9 ogenda kukwata the 4.9 minus this 4. Kaakati bw'onaazaawulako ebbalance oyo asigaddewo you multiply by 20%. Mbadde njagala essimu ekinkubisizeemu awo then bring in this phone mbakubiremu wano ekiba naye namwe nga wekalibeki kati wano balance bw'ofunye bw'omala okufuna akapasenteji kawano okagatteko the 120 ezabadde ezawano gwe musolo ogwa income ya between 4 to 4.9 million. So between 4.9 to 120 million you're going to pay 30%. Kati wano charge ya wano yabadde 300. Kati wofuna 30% difference of 120. The difference here we get about 30%, you get the 300. Then above 120 you'll get this one plus the 30% plus the 300 here, then times the 10%. So omusolo gw'okukolaki gw'okutambula naye bagambye bw'ojja okugira tebere ojja ogikalisiwa you can sit down mpola mpola. Now tax rates for individual employment. Employers are required by law to deduct a tax from employees or to pay as you earn. Pay as you earn is a 10%. But another you can do 235 in the financial 25-26 nga tebanaba kuziza ku mitwalo 33. Kati tegeeza income ya 10% below mitwalo 33 ogenda kusasula pay as you earn, you are exempted. Kakati so let us use this table. It's okay Kani. Let us use this table. Bw'obanga oli wakati w'emitwalo 23 you're going to be charged the 10%. Ngenda kwa mtwalo. Kati bw'onaabeera between 33 you're going to be charged the 10%. This 10% gye bakucharging ano ojja gigattako omutwalo. People have been wondering how do they deduct pay as you earn. Pay as you earn percentage is not the same across. Every income attracts a different pay as you earn. So above 10 million, you will be charged like this, a 30%. You add on this, then times the 10%, an extra income of that money. So this is how you are charged a pay as you earn. Kumisolo omuntu gwebakozesa tosasula pay as you earn newapadde bya NSSF, that is your money, but omuntu agenda naleeta kapesilipu bana tikyafuna akakadde ogenda. You can give me an example mwabaliwo tubuulire bwafuna sente bwetunula ku pesilipu yo bakujjako emisolo gya sente meka gwali mu private sector. Osanga omuntu ng'akoledde kakadde ng'agenda okudda ewaka ng'ekinene nnyo alina emitwalo nga 78 ng'emirala gisigaddewa mu misolo. So that is tax for you. So this is tax on companies. For the companies, the income tax for a company, a body of persons, this is 30%. 30% you see the deductions. For non-resident companies, an additional 15%. So for companies, for them, now, tax on rental income levied by individuals. Muchimanyi buli alina ennyumba osasula omusolo gwa rent, that is rental income. Tax on rental income is levied by individual tax on rental income is levied by when an individual is assessed separately from the individual's other businesses. Guno omusolo gwa ku nyumba and the tax is 20% of the rental income. So this is for you. 20% allowable expenses. PDX 2.8 tax free. That is the threshold. So, and income here was 2.8. What means that 2.8 or more, they will not charge the 20%. Now, but make our rental income. Yeah? Right now, when we're going to is apartments is out that they're single. It's a true. Most of those apartments don't pay rental tax. One is singers, zachi. I never done nyumba wenu kunyigiza milioni bambi sasa naishunga mwezi omwaka nyigiza milioni nyabo ne sasula. That's why at times you find the tax is low. Yaki mumanye tukusesa. Kwa rental income kumsasula 20%. Government in a company, their work contract okusasula okucharginga to enforce payment of these taxes. Ate nayo egisasula 20% ku buli musolo gw'owaddeyo. Kati bw'omala okuyitako 20% ng'ogusasudde, ate ne kampani eyo nebasasula 20% for enforcement of payment of taxes. So kitegeeza nti buli otulanga tusasudde emisolo willingly, gavumenti nekola enforcement enene tukifiirirwamu because the money goes to the enforcer. Nebeera nga kupe 20% of your tax tetuuse. No, government ejjakola 20% ate negizaayo. Kati you know that mathematics doesn't add up. So tulina okufa okulaba nti bwagala buvunaanyizibwa waffe okusasula emisolo willingly, so that will reduce on the cost of enforcement of payment of taxes because it is costly to government. Nti bwesasula sente za enforcement kitegeeza zeyalisigazaawo okukolera emirimu nesigazaawo. The withholding tax or withholding tax twagirabye, the obligation to pay withholding tax nenabawo ekyokulabirako. Mukimanyi nti bw'ogenda mu banka mwabalina akasente n'ogamba nti ogenda kukola say fixed deposit. Management of technical and professional fees 6% withholding for. Then dividends, companies 10 to 15%. Rental income, interest. Bw'omugenda ne muwaayo sente mabanka simanye fixed deposit bajja kujjako ku interest wo bajjako in between 15 or 20% depending. So those are the different taxes. On income tax reporting obligation, value added tax VAT, Section 4 of the VAT Act imposes 18% tax on the supply of goods and services. VAT is an indirect tax. For example, Mama Susan goes to a shop in town and buys a new dress for 50,000. Uganda shilling 7,637 of that price is VAT. If Mama Susan demands for a receipt here, if we see, Mumani Raji government yaleta ifurisi, abasuubuzi mwali mugwedinga 18%. Nga muzitusasuza, but you don't remit to government. Kabiet yako, era, neweba company nga bagiwadde omulimu. Either VAT inclusive or VAT exclusive. Kati bwetujja wano ku goods and services, 18% is mandatory. Kakati wano yalala kyeyategezaako okukola nti buli mu lusiti bwemukweka waliwo n'abantu abakitukola nogana n'ogula olugoye n'aluguza emitwalo 3 n'akola risiti n'agikolako emitwalo 2 oba n'aba n'ebitabo 2 ekimu kiraga zino ekirala kiraga zino. That is why government yali yagala that computerized receipting media. The IFRIS nti buli transaction gyokola is recorded. Kiyambako URA okugyayo omusolo. So that was about the VAT. So wano wakyalika lumanywera. Era tuwandoze wasinga government wejasinza okukolera losses wano ku VAT. The 8% wano. Kakati olina akubuuza sobola okubuuza ekibuuzo nti bano bannaffe abakola trading order. Trading order yali egezaako kurespondinga kuki? Kukudikongestinga amakubo, kukwongeza misolo. What did the trade order communicate? Now, exemptions. Basic needs are exempted to protect the poor. For example, unprocessed food like matoke, beans, and medical services are exempted from VAT. No, the sasula VAT. Yes, sasula imposa kutali. Misolo ya local government. We take our own data, government in charging omusolo. So much as they can sasula VAT, but they pay those small taxes, accounting for VAT, excise duty. Excise duty is a specific tax on luxury and harmful goods. Excise duty is not for everyone. Now, one way to pay Unisa, which might need amafuta, bagabalanga, and chocolate. Yes, so I am saying Yabagamba, Wambabanga Mafuta, but they stay at home. Because movement is optional. The movement of goods and services is not optional. And when the excise duty is high, automatically the burden of payment goes back to the final consumer. So every liter of petrol you buy contains excise duty. That is partly why fuel prices are high and why transport costs go up. So government excise duty is for luxury and harmful goods. So is fuel harmful? Is it luxurious? So whatever fuel is luxury. That means you have an option to either move or not. So example 2 is telecom companies. When you buy airtime or data, you pay excise duty, including OTT for social media tax. We do OTT. Is it now, how much is it? Is it now 5%? We give it over solo. Or while when the president was in the 10th parliament. OTT became OTT. Then example 3, the alcohol or tobacco. A crate of beer is heavily taxed. Government revenue levies on the fact that people will continue to consume these products regardless of the price. Kakati omwenge, obagwa pay, obagwa raisi mujja kugunya. Government ekuteeka paid in solo at times of bagema, okusasula, obutanywa, kyeyongerere. So excise duty, osobola okugyewala naye, nze ndowooza wonna ekusangayo, omugamba nti amafuta gaakwedala, then yawukiba stamp duty. Stamp duty is imposed by the Stamp Act. It is a duty payable on any instrument or document which upon being created, transferred, limited, extended, extinguished, or recorded confers upon any person a right of liability. The affected instruments carried about 66 are listed in the schedule of the Stamps Act. The applicable rates are either fixed or variable. Now, tugenda transfer zettaka bagamba ojja kusasula omusolo kukolera stamp. Stamp duty affidavits. But what we don't find a petition is a low food. As an affidavit says commission, you pay tax. Agreements or memorandum of agreements. Company articles of association. Mugenda when registering these companies, or social send is a stamp. That's the stamp with the caveats, insurance, powers of attorney, promissory notes, mortgages and deeds, debentures. So, and stamp duty is the charges the kufuna, stamp. That is as simple as that. The customs duty. This is a tax levy on goods imported or exported from Uganda at a specific all foreign rates. On the customs duty, customs no money when you are transacting the documents and stamps they give you. Some of these taxes are indicated because they will show that will depend on, customs, they will value the taxes that you pay. What is a Malaba, or is a Kuchula, Mavakosa trucks, Avaisa Kunyoni, Bogeda Sao, eventually taxing. So that is the customs. So the East African Community Customs Management Act is a legal framework for customs operations in Uganda and the region as a whole. That is the East African community. So customs, customs. So administrative linkages in the economy. Where are the linkages? For example, in the informal sector, a trader buys a chibanda or gains a kamukusaya or uze chibanda for million at time from a local farmer. One the government a trader buys a chibanda plot of land for Uganda shillings 50 million from a local farmer. Neither the buyer nor the seller reports this transaction. Government loses stamp duty and capital gains on this. But when they try to get money, that is business for them. It's not the formal tax. So, I want to make sense of those transactions. I'll tell you as a student. Then, the income tax exemptive regulations. BRI tries to capture small businesses by charging a flat rate, for example, 10% turnover for the market business of Chiveco. The informal sector now. Jagala bakuzamu naje muyeyo bameka kumwe ngamukola bilimu jabo ejobananyi ntunda mpatale ntunda manda mvuga boda mvuga taxi tambuza mmere de newakubadde some of your incomes teziqualified for tax naye kino njagala mukimanyi. The sector informal contributes about 49% to the country's GDP, the gross government product, and employs 80% of the workforce, yet it contributes 1% to the total collection. Informal sector, abantu abekolera emirimu gyabwe manyi otugamba banneekolera gyange banneeko somebody akitwala mu kirala, but neekolera gyange is the informal sector, bakola mirimu gyabwe bangi nnyo era bacontributing ebitundu 49% to the GDP w'omusolo, naye mu tax collection bakola 1%. What does this mean? Tugenda kiraba wansi kitegeeza temuli organized government bayambyeko okulaba nga muyingira the tax bracket ebyo byonna byonna. Economic role versus distribution. Now, high output. The sector generates nearly half of the national income through agriculture, roadside vending, markets, small-scale manufacturing. Low direct tax yield. Contribution remains very minimal because most participants operate outside the regulatory frameworks. Then, employment disparity. Out of the roughly 15.8 million working age Ugandans, only 1 million hold formal jobs, tracked consistently from the payers who earn. At the formal sector, elimu bangi naye leta kitono. Lwaki formal sector ebisolo giri direct givaayo mitono. The indirect kujja gifuna ojja kunywa amazzi, ojja kugula sabbuuni, ojja kunywa sukaali, ojja kusasula ebisolo. Why is it hard to tax the formal sector? Cash-based transactions. Most daily businesses rely on physical cash rather than digital trades, hiding actual revenues from authorities. Bano. Bakola ku risiiti obw'ekipapula kizibu nnyo URA okumanya emisolo bano gye balina okuvaako. Unstructured frameworks. Studies from institutions like Makerere University show that lack of chain-level taxation frameworks leads to non-compliance. Then, fear of formalization costs. High compliance costs and complex registration rules push viable micro enterprises to hide business. Abasinga businesses tuzikweka nesava musoro. The leakages, tax evasion and fraud, under declaration, smuggling of goods, tax avoidance, abantu abasinga tebasasula misolo. A multinational telecom company in Uganda makes huge profits. But to avoid the 30% corporation tax, it pays massive management fees to the parent company in tax. And in Uganda, it records zero profit. Multi-managed companies see has in branch tezakoze emisolo, tezakoze magoba, yet tezakoze. Kubanga they inflate the operational costs. Basobola okudeclaringa less tax such that basasula omusolo mutono. Abuse of investment incentives. And that gets a tax holiday to build a factory in Mukono. They build a small structure, claim the incentives, but actually use the land for commercial farming and land speculation, failing to deliver the jobs that they promise. Ebyo ebisinga obisanga mu exemptions government zeewa betugamba nti batiitirira nnyo abagwira than the nationals. So this also brings us back to agriculture. Agriculture contributes to 24% of the GDP. Naye they only contribute 1% of the tax collections. So they employ 70%. So only about 4% of agricultural operations hold active tax registrations. Obulimi butusala, obulimi tetubufunamu lwaki? Obulimi mbu tebuvaamu misolo okusinziira ku gavumenti. Is it kagendere kuba tetuvaamu misolo? Where is the problem? Where is the problem? One, why low tax contribution? Subsistence farming. Nearly 70% of the farmers grow food strictly for home consumption. Government exempts taxes, zero rate on VAT on farm inputs, tax holidays for agro-processing companies to encourage investment. While the government it was zero rate on inputs, agro-processing investment companies baziwa tax exemptions. Which are paid? Which are complaining inputs that pay? Where are we in farm operations? Most small-scale farmers operate informally without structured bookkeeping, making the system unfair. You know, we don't have your government. But when we come back to Ramava, to Kiriza, do we agree that taxes have an impact on one's livelihood? Tukikiriza nti okusasula emisolo oba obutasasula kulina impact ku bulamu bw'omuntu wa bulijjo. It's high time we appreciated that as government, when mandated by law to collect taxes, we must serve the people. Because the mistrust, the evasion of taxes is all dependent on so many factors. Yet at the end of the day, it affects these small taxpayers. No sanga ofuna nga abatono nnyo abasasula be balina obulumi obw'okusasula omusolo. None of them don't pay. Business z'abanene n'osanga you have a shop. Naye basasula emisolo gwe tosasula. Ku customs, especially ku customs, abalina abanene ku government. N'osanga you have the same container, mulese ebintu bibino, weight yemu, n'asasula emisolo egiri far different from you. So bwe tunaabeerawo ne selective application of the law in regard to levying of taxes, automatically, China can get it affecting government. Until government is just nga tax base eri waggulu, nga register, nga abangi basasula than charging from a few. Kitegeeza that it is in the interest of government okufuba okulaba nti buli Uganda they are productive. Whenever many of us are productive, kitegeeza government ejja kujja omusolo ku bangi than okulemera n'okuteekawo environment esobozesa abantu okukola newesanga nti omusolo ogujja kuba tono ng'abangi tebakola ki ng'abangi tebasasula. So payment of tax tebangako punishment. We come here tugenda kwansalira ebibuuzo byaffe tuveewo. What comes to your mind when one mentions about taxes? Ekiba kijja mu bwongo obwo omusolo oteekeddwa okusasula. What comes to your mind as government, as an owner of the business, so remember there are three categories that pay. Individual business, then company. Sort of the government. For you government, but so change the Mutuwa services, what is doing? Why not some sort of no change the why not no? The not for us. But that's a sort of or feel what? Or maybe you have substitute. Not sort of services and government. Government should take a conducive environment to enable people to pay taxes. Create a conducive economic environment, socially, politically. Environment, politically, socially, economically. But not even also whenever you have a low tax base, that means government will find hardships in collecting revenues. Thus, it at the end of the day affects the rate of service quality. Why does government collect tax? We must get services. So, Mr. Government, as you do collect taxes, the little that you do, we want to see the visibility of government in our areas. I want to see government in my business. When I operate a small shop, where is government? When I go to for roadside vending, where is government? You see? When I operate a company, where is government? When do you start speak about businesses? Government is trying to good day or training about my business guy. How? What determines the capital which that become business? Twali mubyale nga osanga omuntu alina capital wa million abiri naye nga buli lunaku atunda emitwalo 15 oba 5. Kitegeeza that business is overcapitalized. Mwe government muvaayo by'okusomesa abantu ku business. Financial skills omuntu asobole okwewola sente zimukolere. Idle capital is a cost to a person kubanga apaying interest on capital that is redundant. Then how much does government collect? You've seen it's anticipated, so it has an estimate of 45 trillion. Hopefully to collect it, where does government draw its mandate? You have seen it's constitutional for government to collect taxes. Who are the key stakeholders in collecting taxes? Government, us, and the businesses that we hold. What does it mean? Government respect the people, government respect our businesses, government respect companies. Because without them, government cannot survive. Respect for the people, create a conducive environment for us to operate business. Mutuwe, obudo, mutusolesa, okukola. Engudo muzikole. Mutunonyeza obutale. Abantu babeera ebyokukola saida tupatesinkawo bawagulu. Ebintu bebetulibako. Nebetulira akasawo ka sukaali mwezi mulamba. Buli wengawo okutunda kitegeeza business ngenda gigala. The categories of taxes we've seen, income tax, we have seen the excise duties, we have seen the VAT, but these are both direct and indirect taxes. There is no clear standard of how many taxes a business pays. That depends on the nature of the business. Why should we pay taxes? It's mandatory because we need to get services, social services from the government. Ruola ngatusuka musoro tutegeza government tugibanje. Ruodo di musoro tugenda ngwera noga tewali dagala because toina constitution yona your government should. That is it. Why does government lose if we don't pay taxes? Government is at big loss if we don't pay taxes because it cannot survive. Government survival is dependent on the revenues that we collect. Actually, even if you say that government will borrow, no country can borrow you money that tackles assessment on what you collect locally. Your capacity to produce locally determines your eligibility to access external loans. I don't know whether I've been a good teacher for today's lesson, but I believe as a non-tax expert, I have tried to do my part. It is your duty and obligation to pay tax, but for government it's your duty to understand that we are the country of Nancy February. Create an environment that is friendly. Dupa musoro is possible. Yagradda akola nekira mukula amateeka agatusomesa okubanga tusobola okusooka emisolo is friendly. N'okuddayo okubuuliza bannayuganda nti ensonga lwaki olina abakulembeze kufuba kulaba nti emisolo gyo gikuyamba. Abakulembeze kusetinga environment ekusobozesa kuba productive side that you can pay taxes. MP takola luguudo, MP tagula ambulance, MPC yakuleetera amazzi, MPC ateeka eddagala mu ddwaliro, MP oguba okulaba nga nina emisolo gy'osasudde gikola ebyo gavumenti byeyina okukola. Era nyongera okukubiriza abaka ba paalamenti mwenna, eri should be an extraordinary, it should be subsidiary, not principle. Obubaka akoze guno obukiribiki asevinga bangi okusinga okonsentratinga ku buli obutonotono. N'ekirala njagala kusaba omukulembeze w'eggwanga tulekerawo okozesa obubi offices nga tukwata paalamenti ne tugikozesa bubi okuyisa emisolo ebitagasa bannansi, okuteekako abantu emisolo emingi, okuyisa amateeka amabi omu taxes, tuyise emisolo egitwala eggwanga maaso. Let these three arms, executive bwetula n'eteekateeka leka paalamenti independently ekola assessment. Now about parliament, it's not that every time is for politics. No. When we get down to the parliament, that is a people's house. And you bet Muria or wait out Uganda. And those should be to promote the concerns and the will of the people. Because every political party aspirations are serving about. Is there any political party? Eriwo government njagala eddagala ly'omutwalo. Eriyo political party yagala enguudo ezirimu ebinnya. Eriyo political party yagala Kampala ebombe. Eriyo political party yagala abantu bafiire malwaliro. Eriyo political party eyali agadde okulembera eggwanga ng'abasibe basinga abali ebweru obungi. There is no single political party yagadde. So, when we get to parliament, politics should not override or wait up government. Michael said, there is no reason as to why you call committees to State House or back Mushinga or Kola. There is no reason as to why Parliament becomes the focus of the NRA. When one gets a focus, well and good. But you should not focus to promote NRM objectives. When the objectives NRM, then you are a wrong party in the government. Yensonga lwaki obudde bwongala okukwata bw'otakkaanya nabo bumale mu kuweereza abantu. If government does its work, opposition babadde agazaaki. Government ng'ekoze obwali. Abantu baali batuza naye Namibia lwaki tomujoyininga gavumenti enirungi abantu obutaka. Kakati oyinza okwesanga ng'olina okukola buno obulimu bwekola awulira afa kubanga abantu tubabuusa. Ng'ate baali badde bunaanyiza obwa gavumenti okukola bino byenkola. This program is not sponsored by anyone. This is a corporate social responsibility from me. This is the best I can give my country. Yes, so right now I'm not going anywhere. I don't want what is what number is not part and part. Because it is the interest of creating a sound environment. Article 4 is very clear about sensitization and distribution of the Constitution. Sensitize people, create awareness. Those are constitutional obligation and mandate of government. So I want to thank you very much, There is time for politics. There is time for service. We should not be enemies. So one does not mean that I should be an enemy of the NRA. Not. Temufula walabigamu. Mushage. Naye mufula mutya walabigamu. Nga mutandise kukiddanya n'okutulugunya bannafu. Then we draw a very clear lane between you and us. Nabirabe kati mubivulu. Abantu baganya mujja politics mubivulu. Nze sijja kikomentingako naye njagala okugamba nti ekireeta politics mu buli kintu. Ngenda bawo ekyokulabirako ebyavudde mu kalulu n'essiwa. Waliwo ewaffe ekyalo bakiyita Nkandwa. Among other villages kwe baakola Zimbabwe in those one elections baakwata abataka ne babajja mu register. Ne bakwata abaana bajja tukolera mu nnimiro, ne bakwata abaana bakola mabaala ne babateeka mu register. Namugga najja n'abakonkomala mu register bamugjeyo. Do you know what the villagers did? Bagenda ekisooka omutajja tukulembera. Number one, ab'NRM bwe tukolanga emikolo gyaffe temujjanga kubanga temwagala mirembe. N'abatuwo tulanga tubadde mu bibiina mubaddize ssente zaabwe baleke obutawo muzibidize muzibaddize bakole ebyabwe. Ono chairman ffe waffe okukola kali kugula kubadde mulondangako. You see? So ekyo kyokka kireetawo obunkenge. Kati otolina bw'oŋŋamba mbu emikolo tegibaamu politics. Ajja kubeeramu kubanga gwe waŋŋamba nze nnonda chairman. Atuukedde ku makya omunnondedde. What happens? Mumanyi kyekitegeeza okuba ne chairman ku kyalo bwewampadde obuli. Kati batandise okuteekawo obunkenge nti bwe tukola enkiiko you must attend. Oteekwa okubeera mu lukiiko. Sijja kubeerayo nga sikukkiririzaamu. Era abantu mbakubiriza chairman yenna gwe mutaalonda nga ne ku kyalo ekyange kamuli nkitaddemu. Era nanyigira abasajja abakulu oli myaka 8 bakutaka banno babajje mu register otudde you can't even raise omukono ogambe nti bannange kyemukola kikyamu. Njagala obategeeza civil disobedience is constitution. Temusobola kusibako bakulembeze. Ekirungi electoral commission yafulumizza a list of all those local councils abateeka mu their complex. Naye ewaffe emawogola mwataddemu ebyalo 2 byokka. Only 2 villages. Villages endala Kamuli, Lusalira, Kyanyinamudu, Kiteredde, ebyalo byonna bye twateekamu temwabitadde. Era reminder twagireese mu electoral commission registrar waffe Damu Kataza yabireese a list of all those villages ezaleka complex mutazikonsidaringa ku kyalo ekyange Kamuli kwenalondera. I mean kwempangalira njagala okutegeeza eggwanga tetulina chairman. Tetumulina ekyo si kirumamu mugamba nti tukuma mu bantu omuliro naye temusobola kujja bantu mu register ne muleeta amajjo ku kyalo ne mutugamba nti otwateeka okukulembera mu kiggulu. Kakati ekiri kye mbagambye nti awo politics atandikidde ku kyalo oyo talijja mu mukolo gwange namukoganizingaka chairman kuba temulondangako. You see? So netubagamba nti politics ebintu ebitabiyinza kuvaamu abatereka ebivulu bwabiteekeka nga abantu balamu ababanyikiriza nga batukulembedde ng'olyagamba ffe banyikiriza tetujja kugendayo. Tukumaakuma abantu okulaba nga baba obumu naye njagala okujjukiza gavumenti obumu bakuzimba. Obumu buzimbibwa ffe abalina obuyinza. Buli wakwata obuyinza n'obukozesa bubi kitegeeza oyongera kwawula bantu. Kaakati gwe oteekawo embeera etwawula ffe baani abeegatta nga bw'osazeewo twawula. N'oŋŋambe mawogole ewange gye mwaleeta amagye essaawa 5 ne gatandika okuyoola box ku box ne gazitwala. Ewange Namuga tewalabwa kalulu ebokisi baatwala ntwala ng'ovaayo oŋŋamba nti Namuga toddamu okwogera ku byobufuzi. Kaawe akalulu k'emangola kaawulire babbakadde. Era y'ensonga lwaki buli lwenjogera waliwo ntonalebo ng'akalulu kakuluma abalala kaabatwala mu nsiko abantu ne bafa kalulu. So tetusobola kukkiriza mbeera etambula kati ng'ogamba abantu b'Zimbabwe nti mube bumu. Era natundoyo omukyala RDC Kabayi ng'agamba bantu bali ab'Zimbabwe eby'omuntu byerabye tetusobola kubyerabira maama wange. Temusobola kumala kutwala munyago mukoleko obujjaza amaanyi mutandika okumakuma abantu okwegatta. Kitegeeza nti mwekumenkume tekigenda kusoboka. Tuteekwa okufuna obwenkanya from day one. Tulonda tutya abakulembeze tujja kusasula emisolo ng'abatukuŋŋaanyamu omusolo ne batuufu. Obadde chairman gwesikkiririzaamu ku kyalo naye ng'omanye ensonga ezeetambulirwamu chairman gwompadde obuli. A political office is given by the people. It is the people that appoint political officers. They give you the mandate. A political office is occupied with the mandate of the